Welcome to Hollywood Insider Help, where you can learn more about how to earn a good living as an author, screenwriter, producer, or podcaster. Remember, you can find great live and on-demand training designed to help you earn a good living making media you love at nancyfultonmeetups.com and nfm24.com. Our host is Nancy Fulton. Let's dive in.
In tonight's workshop, we're going to be talking about a topic that's somewhat dear to my heart, which is how filmmakers can do a better job of making sure that their project is easy to fund, easy to cast, easy to get distribution for, easy to market, and easy to make successful. A lot of producers unwittingly manufacture situations in which they are making their project significantly more difficult to release. They're putting problems into their project very early on that they're unaware are going to make it impossible for them to move forward on the work that they want to do and the work that they're hoping is going to lead to a very successful filmmaking career. Tonight's team help people produce projects. They actually will do the set of things that need to be done in order to ensure that a project is successful. And they work with people in a wide variety of ways. So the first person I'd like to introduce you to is Ray Ellingsen, who is located in what is the lower left corner of the screen. And he's been successfully producing projects for over 30 years. He has credits on more than 50 productions as producer, executive producer, line producer, writer, director, and studio manager. And he has extensive experience in developing, funding, producing, and acquiring distribution for feature films, documentaries, and commercial projects. And in 2009, Ray founded Moving Pictures Media Group, which is a company that develops and produces both in-house projects and those for outside clients. I'd also like you to meet Jeffrey Hardy, who is located in the lower right corner of the screen. And he is an expert in film analytics. He's founder of Film Profit, LLC, and he's a very sought-after film finance and distribution analyst. His expertise has been featured in The Hollywood Reporter, Fortune Magazine, The Philadelphia Inquirer, The Washington Times, The Black Film Report, among other publications. He's spoken before the California Film Commission and National Media Network. He works with studios and producers to analyze screenplays, production budgets, and marketing strategies and distribution plans to maximize profitability, and consults with investors to ensure their funds are allocated for maximum financial returns. Grace Michaliski works with Ray to move projects from initial induction all the way through the process of finished film development into production and distribution. So, Grace, do you want to talk a little about your background and how you ended up working with Ray and Jeffrey?
Of course. Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, so I started working at a TV studio in Los Angeles and Santa Monica, and I was there for a few years working in the administration for the actual studio. So I had a lot of experience with the internal working and then the productions that would come in and out of there. At the time, it was Mad TV and Disney channels, That's So Raven, Corey in the House, things like that. And then I got a little tired of the LA life and went to small businesses and to management there for small business owners running their teams. I did that for about the same, about 7-10 years. Now I started with Moving Pictures Media Group in 2019, right before the pandemic hit. So I got the crash course of independent film. So with my TV studio experience and my small business experience, it's a best of both worlds, and I love it, and I'm here to stay. So there's a quick background on me. Thank you, Nancy.
That sounds very cool. So people who have attended my events previously know that since COVID hit, I've been telling people that the market's very uncertain and that it's a very risky business trying to put large-scale productions forward. And I've recommended if you've never produced anything, you should start thinking about producing micro budget features and small projects so you can get credits that you need and acquire experience in trying to take things to market and produce projects. This is the first time in since 2019 that I've started to see strong signs that it's possible to actually produce a traditional multi-million dollar independent feature successfully. And uh, because the market is sort of changing radically. And we're going to have an event coming up in January to talk about that. We're going to talk about what's changed, specifically what has changed. That's going to make it, that's opening up doors that have been closed for quite a while. In tonight's workshop, our first topic our overall topic is how to make your project significantly easier to produce and fund and secure pre-sales for, to market, to distribute, etc. And with that in mind, I'd like Ray, if you could start us off and talk about. I think screenplay is kind of the place everything begins because every project is based upon it, and everything hangs off of it. Can you talk about what mistakes producers make early on that make their screenplay significantly more difficult to develop, produce, fund, find talent for, etc.?
Sure. First of all, good evening. Thanks for having us on. You're asking sort of a nebulous question that has a couple different answers, but I think, if you're starting at the screenplay level, you're looking at, most people come in, they go, I got a screenplay, it's perfect, all I need is financing. And you go, well, there's a couple steps, in between that. And I think the mistake that I've seen most is people look at their screenplay and they're locked into it. They don't know who their market is. They don't know how they're going to market it. They don't know, by who the market is, who's the audience. They don't know how to reach the audience. They have no idea. They just think there's some magic tree that they can shake and financing will fall out of it. And their screenplay is going to get made. Screenplays are a collaborative effort. I know because I started out as a screenwriter. It's not just you sitting down and writing something and then all of a sudden it gets financed. We ask that a lot of clients get coverage on their screenplays so that they have a better idea or a third party objective viewpoint of what's marketable about this, what's not, what's the character development. Beyond the creative side of character development, if we're talking about getting a screenplay from and if I may take a moment, development is this sort of euphemistic term that everybody throws around. Nobody seems to have an idea of what it really is. You go up to people and you go, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm in development on a film. Well, what's that mean? I don't know. I'm trying to get financing. Okay. Do you have all the elements you need that are necessary to get your financing? Well, I don't know what that is. So development for us is just a laundry list of things that you have to have in place in order to meet the requirements for production funding. And what I mean by that is whether you're going through debt financing, which is how 90 to 95% of all films are financed. A debt mechanism through a bank, whether you're going through deficit financing through somebody like Amazon Studios or Hulu, whether you're going through private equity through somebody like Gulf Capital, they all want to see the same things. They want to see risk mitigation and they want to see collateral. Everything in between those two bookends is development. Risk mitigation is in the form of analytics and data, which is why we know Jeff Hardy so well, because he does analytics and data. He'll do comparisons and trends, market analysis, projections, world release data metrics, audience saturation parts, all the stuff you and I could care less about. But anybody in a financial situation would like to use and see to mitigate the risk. Who's your audience? How are you going to reach them? What's your methodology of deployment into the marketplace? All these questions need to be answered by anybody who's going to give you money, make a film. That's the one end. That's the risk mitigation, the analytics data. And Jeff, by the way, will put together an analytics package, which is, I'm not kidding, 100 to 130 pages of data. It's like a phone book. And it has all those things that you need to have. And it gives you as a filmmaker or producer, it gives you a blueprint for how you're going to execute this and make this film and put it into the marketplace. The other end of it is collateral. A collateral instrument is no less than a distribution sales agreement with minimum sales guarantees and or pre-sales in the foreign market. And most people go, oh, I can't get that. I need talent. And it's a chicken and egg of, Distributors want to see talent before they'll sign a distribution deal, and the distribution needs to be in place before talent will get on board. That's actually not the case lately, because 90% of what distributors are looking for is an audience. Now, they thought they were looking for talent, but talent brings an audience, at least it used to. Nowadays, not so much. But what they need is an audience. They need to know who's your audience, how do you reach it? Because distributors are unfortunately very lazy and unimaginative. But if you'll do half of their job for them and build an audience, then they'll give you a minimum sales guarantee that you require to take to the bank, to get financing, get talent, to get your film made. So I said the bookends are risk mitigation and collateral, which is analytics data and distribution. Everything in between is development. You have building an audience. We use companies like Prometheus and Ribo Media. They're digital marketing companies. We do legal formation. We put together all the elements necessary. We do a budget and schedule that's bondable for a completion bond. We put together all these elements, graphic arts components. So there's a visual medium, and we create a package so that when we go to a finance institution and they go, well, do you have this? You go, yeah, it's on page 57. Well, what about distribution? Here's our distribution sales agreement. So what you're doing is you're mitigating that risk and giving a bank a reason to give you money. I hope I didn't stray too far and at least covered what you're looking for.
No, I think it's really good. I think it provides a lot of context for people to understand the fundamentals of distribution. And I also think you discuss the fact that the script has to be marketable, and most people don't know what that means. They have an idea what it means, but they don't actually understand. So, Jeffrey, can you talk for a few minutes about are there mistakes that people make? Somebody brings in their baby, which is the script that they've spent 2 or 3 or 5 years working on and that they feel very passionate about from a spiritual standpoint. It's the film that they always wanted to make. And, they know other filmmakers have brought in projects like that, like Quentin Tarantino's, Reservoir Dogs. And we go, why can't I do that with my project? Can you talk about the mistakes that people make in the screenplay, or by designing the screenplay or writing the screenplay, or insisting that their screenplay not change, that translate into their film not being fundable?
There's a lot of little elements to that, but essentially a story is a matrix of differing motivations of the characters. And most people who are writing their scripts are not looking at those characters and their motivations and the matrix, which drives the action. Okay. They're lost in, are we going on the bridge? Or are we going up in a helicopter? Or where are we going, et cetera? And some of that is the sexiness of writing, just being lost in that process. So I think it's really important for a script to go through real development, like Ray was saying, getting coverage that's looking at it, broad view, and how does it fit into the market. And almost every filmmaker we work with gets pushed to a certain degree to take their project further, to refine their project. So the very first mistake they make is it's just right the way it is. Okay. It's never just right until it's gelled and shot, and then it's as right as it could be. You see what I'm saying? Based on turning it off, then every film has to be pushed and pushed to get it to the best state it can be.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I've mentioned before is that this whole idea that you've got a project, and within the project itself is this grand idea that if you just pitch it the right way, all the tumblers, or as Ray said, all the money will fall out of the tree. all the tumblers will click and the safe will open and the money will come out.
Mhm.
That's like so rare as to be almost never. That's a golden bird that nobody has.
Mhm.
So you really have to, as a very first step, realize that your project is going to need to be refined as you go forward. There are a lot of minds that will get together around the project. And certainly we all do that when we're working on one. We all, go over it that way. And another mistake I think that's made is it's not so much in the script, it's the way you're approaching the business. If you are not approaching it as an entrepreneur, even if you're not going to do everything, if you're not thinking about it entrepreneurially from the business aspects and so much that you are going to have to do and or help make decisions about, then I think you're making a really big mistake coming into it. And you need to be ready for both of those.
I, if I
Is that
may,
something?
yeah, if I may, on that note, Jeff just hit on something pretty important, which is, the biggest mistake filmmakers make with their screenplays, they don't treat it like a business. A guy named Sam Markoff, we all owe our careers to. And if you don't know who Sam Markoff is, look him up and certainly read his book, Flying Through Hollywood by the Seat of My Pants. Sam Markoff once said that the film business is 95% business and 5% film. And if more filmmakers understood that, they'd be much more successful. So I think the biggest mistake is you do not treat this like a business, and you need to. Any film is just another widget. It's just another business you're putting into the marketplace.
Mhm. So what's interesting is I both agree and disagree. One of the reasons I tell people to do micro budget projects is because feel free to waste your $10,000. People spend $50,000 on a car just because they want it, you know?
Right.
And if you're driven to do something, if you've got, you know, I have room in my heart for the Picassos, probably because I've been one over the years, I just want to dump money into this project and I don't expect to make, a, it's going to be a testament to what I felt I wanted to put out into the world. Occasionally it goes well. I think a lot of good documentaries are made that way. Just I had to tell this story. But I think when you're talking about the kind of projects that you guys do, which are, and that you help people do, which are the kind that can make you truly wealthy, that that are that have budgets like $1 million, $2 million, $5 million. You're talking about projects that have name talent attached, that can actually get distribution deals that are going to make that could be worth significant revenue. The kind that you know, like Reservoir Dogs turned out to be when all was said and done. When you those projects are they are collaborative projects. They bring a whole bunch of great minds together, and they create a piece of intellectual property and a piece of film, for lack of a better word, that is worth that much money because that's how much money it generates. And when I think about screenplays, one of the things I think about is, especially when people don't go through coverage, is they don't realize it has to be marketed. The reason you do the coverage is so you can figure out how the hell you're going to tell people about it. What is this film about? Who is its target market? Is this a science fiction film? Is this a Western? Is it a science fiction and Western film? And has that ever worked in the history of time? You know, is it a period piece? And is the quality of your production going to make it so that it's a good enough period piece that it can actually make money? So, which I think is where film analytics and the intersection between film analytics, where you look at the market, see how other people succeeded so you can emulate their success and figure out what the budgets should be and so forth. And then the film coverage where you can see where things fit. So, Grace, can you talk for just a few minutes about when you're working with people to get coverage? Do you get coverage, multiple rounds of coverage? Do you help filmmakers walk through the process of shipping their script off to multiple people to get coverage? Do you get coverage from coverage services, or do you have experts like directors and talent managers? Like, who gives you the coverage? Is it just any coverage service, or?
There's a couple different places that we go to depending on what's appropriate. We have some ghostwriters actually that'll give coverage that we'll go to. And we'll usually one round will do the trick, but sometimes it doesn't. We might have to go through again. And then Jeff Hardy actually has a gentleman that we work with who does coverage for Film Profit, and we'll use him as well. And so there's a couple different places. It just depends on exactly where the script is at currently and what we think is needed.
So, like, sometimes you might have people that give coverage, and they're also script doctors, in which they can also surgically sort of tell you what scenes have to change and what has to change in those scenes. Am I understanding that?
Correct.
Cool. So let's.
Did you have something to add? You looked like you did.
No, there are numerous companies out there that do this. You can just look them up and do a Google search. There's Script Services, the Kevin Meelan company. There's a bunch of them out there.
But you pick and choose the ones based upon the project, right?
We find, we find that certain people who handle coverage are better towards certain genres. We have a girl that if it's a rom-com or something like that, we're definitely going to her. She's written them and successfully worked in the industry, and she does great, helpful, objective coverage for clients.
That's amazing. So I think that brings up the next question, which is there are casting decisions that people that are producing young filmmakers or new filmmakers or filmmakers who worked on the studio side and are trying to dive into going from being first AD to being producer. Casting decisions that they make early in a project that can make it difficult or impossible to fund or sell. Can you talk, Ray, a little bit about what kinds of mistakes people can accidentally make early on when it comes to casting?
Sure. This has been an experience of mine several times with clients and with one of my own films. A lot of people go, I'm just going to attach talent and a name and I'm going to get financing. Well, unfortunately, a lot of times people don't look into what this talent brings. Is this the right film for them to even be involved in? And you look at, part of that's analytics, but part of that is you can go to a distributor and go, hey, and this happened to me. I had an actor, a well-known actor attached. And I went to a distributor and I said, hey, I've got this guy. And he was like, oh, well, good luck. And I was like, you don't want to distribute it? And he goes, nobody wants to work with him. And, it was one of those things I didn't know about. You need to do your research on everything. I think people go, oh, I'm just going to attach talent. There's a lot of things in between. Unless you know somebody's like your neighbor and, hang out at a swimming pool all the time and he's major talent or her. I think you have to go through the process of getting a casting director on board. You have to go to the agencies and the managers, and they want to know that you're financed. They want to know you have distribution. So there's a lot of steps that you need to employ before you get to the point of casting. Doing analytics is one of those because, Jeff will tell you, you don't want that person in this film. You get to the marketing part of it, and they're doing social media, and it turns out that person, is not somebody that people are following in social media, and the distributor doesn't want to have to take a chance on that. So there's a lot of steps before you think about casting that you need to get involved with. And somebody asked the question I saw in the chat that, when you bring somebody like Jeff Hardy on, if you're going to develop a project and you come to a company like ours, we'll go, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a development budget, which is just the costs associated with development, bringing on somebody to do analytics, doing a budget schedule, getting your legal formation, all those elements. One of the first things we do is analytics and a budget and schedule, because the people who do the budget and schedule will work with Jeff. And, when you talk about people go, oh, my budget's 10 million based on what? Well, it's 10 million. Okay. So there's one thing people don't understand, which they need to, is there is a floor and there is a ceiling to a budget. The floor is your burn rate. That is your day out of days schedule. You've got X number of days, X number of scenes in the script. You're going to be at this location on this day with these actors and this crew and this equipment. And you got to pay for, fees and all this other stuff. That's your burn rate, your floor, times how many days you're going to be on the set. That's what it's going to cost. You have a ceiling. The ceiling is when Jeff Hardy gets involved, he goes through and does the data and he says, okay, here we go. We've got this. Here's your market. Here's what your audience saturation point is. Somewhere between the floor and the ceiling is going to be your budget. Because you're going to have the basics and you're going to go, well, if I add this and this element, which costs this and this, I can get this much more money. So somewhere between those elements is where your budget's going to land. You don't know. Jeff once said a budget's going to be what it's going to be, not what you want it to be. I've been proven on that over and over. It's correct.
So, Jeffrey, can you actually talk a little bit about like what it means to like what casting means to a project and mistakes that you see people make when it comes to casting?
Yeah, I got several things to say, and they're going to start off with I'm a contrarian, okay? Because people talk about the bankability of stars.
Hmm.
That's a constantly moving target, both because of the star themselves, because of the industry. And I study the actual audiences that show up for theatrical films. Females, the size of the female component, size of the male component, under 18, 18 to 25, all of the different. Why did you come to see this movie? For the lead actor, the lead actress, the subject matter, the story,
Hmm.
okay, the director. And those are not all commensurate. They're not all the same thing
Hmm.
at all. And other studies have told us that when someone is contemplating a comedy, they're looking at the cast. Well, yeah, if it's a comedy, you want to feel like it's going to be funny. So you either have to consume part of it and become clear that it's a comedy, or someone you think is funny is going to be in it. Someone you trust to be funny.
Hmm.
Uh, but for low budget dramas, it's radically different. You don't have to have, cast and everybody knows who they are. So they're looking at the story, et cetera, et cetera. And so if people talk about genres, there's genres, subgenres, all of that kind of stuff. But generally within each genre, there are key things that work and don't work. So there's two things that the studios have done to distort the business. Two major things. One is they convinced everybody that so and so in the film proves it's going to make money. There are going to be so many other things that go wrong, and even they can go wrong. The other thing they've done is they've poked us into a corner where most favored nations deals and things of that nature give people outsized expectations of what's going to happen with their film. Because those people are running it more like an insurance business than creating entertainment and selling entertainment that is going to touch people.
Mhm.
Forgive me, I'm a contrarian on a lot of stuff, okay? But I'm trying to look at these things and zero in to that pocket, like Ray is talking about, where we have enough headroom on the potential profitability and not too many red flags. You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Tell us that we're going to get stuck. So now I can't line out what those all are because every project, when I start running the numbers, I can feel how slick or sludgy the stream is for it. You
Right.
know, it's just so many things. But I hope I'm answering your
I
question.
think so. I mean, I think the key thing is I think people a lot of times just attach talent. Sometimes they attach their cousin or their brother or themselves to the project, and which is very risky business. Or they have some star that they think is, or somebody that's famous or has some sort of a name, and they attach them and they think that guy's going to be able to carry the project, not realizing it's going to have a major impact because that guy may not be marketable. And it may be he doesn't have an audience. He may not bring an audience with him to the project. And he may be entirely wrong for the project. And all of those things require analysis to determine. You have to see how they've done previously. And the other thing I wanted to mention just briefly is people have this notion, well, I only want to, put $2.5 million, into this project. It's just a really small film, or I want to do $5 million. You know, you can buy an apartment building in California, in Los Angeles, in a nice area for $5 million. So it's not a small amount of money. It's a big amount. And when you're putting together a film project, people who are putting that kind of money into a project, just like if they were putting it into a production loan, have requirements. They care a lot about their $5 million that they're putting into your project. So you may think it's a small amount of money because that's what the industry seems to tell you, but it matters how the people that are putting the money in, the banks that are putting the money in, and banks do put money into films. They care a lot. It's for them, it's $5 million is $5 million. Just like if they were putting money into an apartment building, there's risks they're not going to take. So the next question that I wanted to talk about is, I think, key crew. So as much as a project it has to do with the story, and as much as it has to do with the people that are going to be in front of the camera, the people behind the camera are tremendously important to distributors and to investors and to lenders. And can you talk? Let's go to Jeff first this time. Jeff, can you talk for a few minutes about how the right key crew and the wrong key crew can impact a budget and impact the success of a project?
You're talking about signals and actual activity.
Mhm.
There's signals with who you're attaching to your project to help you do the various crafts and creative, et cetera. There's a term I use a lot, and it's called path to execution.
Mhm.
Okay. And your path to execution is different on different projects. So I worked on a project that was a historical piece about the Salvation Army.
Mhm.
Salvation Army was going to be kind of involved in a marketing capacity. Now, if you've got a piece of paper that they're really going to show up, okay, and really aid in the marketing, and we've got other projects that use some of these kinds of things. Every project's different. That is a proof that you can do what you're saying you're going to do. You don't want to go too far down the proof scale. You want to only operate at the upper end of it in the early stages.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I just want to caution everybody that there's a lot of work that goes into this development. So if you glom on things, glittery things all over this project that may have to fall off, you've wasted your time and effort, because a lot of people believe that the trigger is I've attached this and I've attached that, or so-and-so will play the lead. Boom, you've got your money. And that's not necessarily true. I had a picture that Benedict Cumberbatch was attached to. I was working on. His girlfriend got pregnant. He dropped off, and they were scrambling for 2 months to replace him. And it was a much lesser replacement. And the picture suffered greatly because of it. Doing too much too early and relying on that to make everything go, I think is a problem.
So you're saying that if you're going to attach those first key crew members, like director or like cinematographer or whatever, they really have to be cream of the crop for your particular project?
I don't know, maybe Ray should answer that.
Yeah.
Let's take a step back if we can for a moment. You're talking about how does crew affect you getting your picture done? There's a lot of things, there's a lot of steps in development. What's the key crew? What's this? The thing that you want to keep in mind is you have to satisfy other people. You have to satisfy the financiers. In order to satisfy a financer, you need to be able to get a completion bond. To get a completion bond, you better have a good AD on board who's bondable. You better have a good line producer on board who's bondable. They don't need to be the best in the industry. They just need to be competent at their jobs. You need to make sure that if you bring on these key personnel, again, we're not talking cast, or you were referring to crew. If you're talking about crew, one of the things that I always look for, and I've been searching for years, is a phenomenal editor. because you're going to go to a distributor and that distributor is going to go, I want to see a cut of the film. And if you don't have an editor dialed into exactly what the vision is and how to change that if necessary, how to create, different storylines off of what you started with, distributor may go, no, I need more action. And if you don't have a great editor who can understand that concept and infuse whatever footage you have into creating that, you're sunk. So there's you don't have to have the best in the business. You just have to have people that are good at their job. And you need to, when you're crewing up, everybody goes, oh, get a great director, a named director. Just get a director that understands the vision and has enough business sense to understand what he's supposed to deliver to a distributor, so that that distributor will honor their agreement and pay back the money to the bank, which, they're sort of first position to want everything. You've got to satisfy a lot of other people. And instead of going, I want this director, I want Neil Marshall, who happens to be my favorite director. He may not be great for a picture. He wasn't bondable for several years. So, there's a lot of things that you need to look at from a business standpoint when you're looking at crewing up. You need to get the right person for the job, not the best people in the world, just the people who are competent enough to do the job and bring it in on time and on budget. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, a lot. Actually, I think it provides a lot of clarity, because I think some people think, well, if I get a name, the super director, and they're all, this guy is best for every possible film. And you're indicating that's not the case. They have to be fit to the project, and they have to meet requirements that are related directly to that project for people that are going to be putting money and support into it.
It's a business,
It's a
and
bit-
you need to treat it like a business.
So the other thing you've mentioned is that marketing is a key aspect of getting a project successful, and that you need to start the marketing even before the production begins. Do you actually even start marketing or doing market testing or market analysis, which may involve some market testing during the development process? Is that part of the development process to figure out how responsive a market might be?
Was that to Jeff or to me?
Actually, I'll put it to you first, and then
Sure.
but I'm very interested in Jeff's opinion as
Yeah.
well.
Sure. So part of what Jeff does is in the analytics data is he looks at the market, but he works directly with companies like Ribbo Media, who does digital audience marketing, and they do an analysis as well. And so he compiles all this information from his sources. He works directly with other sources, and you start building a market in development. It's one of the line items in the development budget, and bringing on Ribbo Media, bringing on Film Profit to do the analytics, and all these companies and vendors work together to try to build your audience out. There's a lot of facets to it. We have a company called Prometheus, and they're just brilliant at social media and marketing. They know how to build an audience. They take the digital audience analysis from Ribbo. They take the analytics data from Jeff Hardy's company, and they find and target an audience based on those numbers and those metrics. And so that's pretty critical in development to build an audience, because when you go to, again, I brought this up earlier, when you're going to a distributor, you can go, oh, I've got this out. They're like, oh, and you go, perhaps I forgot to mention, I have 500,000 active followers on social media. They will sign your deal because they don't have to do their job anymore. You just did it for them. Somebody in the chat brought up earlier about influencers. Is that enough for distributors? Well, distributors want to see talent because it makes it easier to do their job, because they don't like doing their job. Social media influencers, if they're bringing you 4 million people, is that 4 million active followers? Because a lot of times it's not. How many active followers are they bringing you? How many people are dialed into this particular project and following it and commenting and posting to it in real time? So active, bringing on influencers, does it help? If you're doing something for, like a video on demand, or, AVOD, which is advertising based video on demand. If you're doing something that's a $10,000 budget and you have an influencer who has 5 million people, sure, that's super helpful. You're doing a $5 million film and you bring on a social media influencer. Hopefully they can act if they're in it, but if they're just coming on a producer capacity, they're helpful, but they're not the driving force to getting your film into the marketplace.
So Jeffrey, could you sort of address the same topic, and also maybe talk a little bit about whether or not that you actually develop posters and other kinds of media to start testing the market on what presentation or framing of the project is going to work best for the project?
Oh, yes, I can. But the way we do this, there are segments that work on certain elements of it. The primary thing I'm doing is segmenting the audience. So I can tell you how many are male, how many are female, how many are in various age clusters. And I actually take those and drill down through the US Census to identify chunk of human beings that we can potentially address with this material that would fit into the profile of the film, the segment profile. I don't do marketing planning. So then my work then goes to, there are people who do poster, other graphic arts work within our group. Okay, let's call it vendors who do that kind of work. And I am talking to Prometheus, to Rivo, etc. And we're each of us coming at it from a different angle. And I know we're doing a fantastic job. One, when somebody else thinks of something I didn't think of, etc. And then two, when we're triangulating on roughly the same place, then I know we're really banging on all cylinders. And I usually feel really comfortable about that. So then what I do is I illustrate this, because people who are going to let go of their own hard-earned money, or even if they just inherited it, let go of their own money, they're going to let go of their bank money. They're going to let go of some corporation money. I've even worked with people who work with institutional investors. Okay. So they want to know that it's all not just blind pie in the sky, throwing it out there, that there's a real set of targets for it. I define those targets, but I don't do the media planning, et cetera. And I just want to add, like, I continually impressed with what Prometheus is doing and what Rivo is doing.
But one of the things that you were asking, Nancy, is do we, in the development stage, I think you were inquiring, do we do test audience? Do we do, when we're building that up, we do graphic arts. We do a mock-up poster. It's for the distributor primarily to give them an idea of what's going on. But it's also for material to put onto the website that we build.
Mhm.
We do an and we do an integrated web presence for them that ties directly to social media. We build social media platforms. And so we're putting this out to an audience. We're going, hey, here's the new poster for the film. And people comment on it. And companies like Prometheus and Ribo, they look at that and they look at the sort of temperature of what people's reactions to that is, and they adjust accordingly. So there is sort of a test marketing phase to some extent in development, but not like when you have a film out there and you bring in test audiences and check out,
No, not that. I think exactly what you just said is basically you try to make it so that you have a website for people to go to, and you have a poster, and you may end up with a couple of different versions of posters, and then you don't put on the website, but you make it so just enough market testing so you can say, okay, this is hot enough that you can get people to actually go to the website, hot enough that you can actually get them to give you their email address, hot enough that people go, like, they understand what they're going, I do want to see that film. I'm willing to sign up at its website.
Well, and another thing is when you're building this audience out, there's a lot of social media, the interactive social media that you do that targets people comment. So they come back. And we had one client who had this really brilliant idea. He was doing this sort of religious science fiction film that was very God centric. And he started a podcast and that was tied to his social media links that was, are there angels and demons? And he got tons of people commenting on this because everybody's got an opinion. And if you give people a voice, which is what social media is all about, if you give them a voice and they feel like they're being heard and they feel like this is something in line with their feelings and thoughts, they'll follow you and they'll become, as I mentioned earlier, super fans who are going to go out to everybody we know and go, oh, you need to check out this website, check out this poster. So you get them engaged and involved through these, posters, through different imagery, through different comments, through different social media sites and driving those sites to the website. So all that's part of what you're building in development is trying to get an engaged audience.
Mhm. So, and Grace, when you're working with people that are working with the team, you're the one that helps people actually move the content around or make sure that people, you need to, because I think that's a huge problem for people on a regular basis who are filmmakers. They don't have a push, so that stuff doesn't get done, right?
Yep.
I can't tell you how many times people have said, "I just want somebody to give me accountability. Can I pay you just to meet with you once a month or once every week, so I have somebody to be
Yep.
accountable to?" So you're
That's
kind of the
me.
accountability guy. Look, you want to develop this film, you've invested money into it. Now you have to do the part where you actually come through on the things that we're asking you for.
Yep. No, exactly. Where's this? Where's that? You owe this to this vendor. I'm kind of Tetrising everybody around.
So there's a timetable, and you can say, "This is how long this is gonna take." It's not gonna take an infinite period of time.
Correct.
So, I think we've covered a lot of, the topics that we were gonna address. Early on, we addressed the steps for developing your film project from the ground up. Do you wanna, briefly review that, or would you rather start taking questions?
Let me address just development as a whole, and
Mm,
that might answer some questions. I've seen some of the things in the chat. So
mhm.
people are asking, how do you get involved in development? What's first? Is it the chicken or the egg? How much money do you need? How much? So let's just take a cross section of development. Say you have a project and you go, hey, I got this script. I want to get it made. You contact somebody like Moving Pictures Media Group, our company. We will go through, we'll review the project. We'll get back to them right away. We usually have a Zoom conference or meet with the client and say, hey, look, here's your project. Here's what we think we can do. We will put together a development budget. That is just the costs associated with development, not production. We do not charge a fee for that. We put that together because people need to know what they're up against. And I'm just throwing a number out there. Let's say we come back and the development budget is $50,000. I'm just throwing a number out. So they go, okay, it's 50 grand. Great. I don't have that in my sock drawer. And you go, that's okay. We have companies like Film Funding LA, Michael Pravers, and actually, Michael pretty well as well. He's a finance facilitator. There's finance facilitators out there. We will send a client directly to them. We don't charge anything for that. But the reason I recommend Film Funding LA is Michael Praver doesn't charge any upfront fees either. He doesn't have his hand out like a lot of other people. He will go through in a couple of minutes. He'll go, hey, here's what I can get you in financing. And if he can get you that money, he'll go ahead and secure that with unsecured lines of credit and loans. Means you don't have to put up your house or collateral or anything. As long as your credit's not tanked, he can probably get you something. And so now you come back and you go, okay, I have development financing. I know it's going to cost this. What do we do? Well, then we contact a group of vendors. We put together based on that budget. We're going to need analytics. We're going to need a budget and schedule. We're going to need, social media marketing. We're going to need a legal formation. We're going to need a producer's representative to secure distribution. So our company goes out and brings on vendors like Jeff's company, and they will then go through, do the analytics data. We'll get budgets and schedules done. There's a series of drawdowns that happens over a 2 to 4 month period, which is the development period, where we're doing all this, preparing all this data and putting it together and packaging it so that once the analytics and the budget and schedule are done, we'll then bring on people to do social media and we'll do some of the legal formation. Once that's done, we'll do another drawdown. So it's not just, it's 50,000, 1, 2, 3, go write a check. We do a series of drawdowns. The client will either pay the vendor directly or pay to a third-party notification account, and that notifies the client, us, and the vendor, so everybody knows where the money's at and what it's being used for. We'll go through and put together these elements, first the analytics and some other data. Once that's done, we'll go to the next step. And then once we have a full package with distribution, all the analytics, cast included, we will then take that package to financing, whatever the appropriate financing is at that point, because we'll have all the elements necessary to meet the requirements for that finance. And one of the other questions that came up was, what's my minimum budget to get involved in development? Well, if you're making a $10,000 movie and it costs you $50,000 for development, the math doesn't add up. So, you're going to want to make sure that in most films, again, budget's got to be what it's going to be, not what you want it to be. Oh, I got $100,000 film
Mm-hmm.
based on. So, you go through that development process. Sometimes people go, oh, I got a $50 million film. It turns out to be a $5 million film. Or they go, oh, I have a $500,000 film. And Jeff goes, oh, it's a $2 million film because here's why. So all those things get determined throughout the development process. And you get, as I always refer to it, smarter people than me involved so that they can weigh in and help make your project success.
So do you stay with the filmmaker when it comes time to actually approach banks, and the team that you've put together, the development process puts you in a position where you've finished development, you've got a project at that
Sure.
you do start looking for funding. Do you guys stay around to help them walk them through that process as
There,
well?
there are two ways that our company can work with a client. We can come on as just a consulting service for which we don't charge any upfront fees, but once they've secured development financing, we would come in for a line item, just like the vendors, and be paid a fee for our services of setting up the package and taking them to financing. In that event, we would take them to financing. We'd drop them off at the doorstep, kind of like handing on your corsage and sending you to the prom. Or if a filmmaker says, hey, look, I don't have the infrastructure to go through production, our company is actually a production services company. We can come on, and in that case, we go through the development process aforementioned. We would not charge a fee during development, but instead we'd come on as the production services company. We'd be a work for hire in association with co-production. And people go, oh, what's production services? Production services handles things like helping with the casting, setting up the completion bond, setting up the tax credits if you're shooting in a tax incentive state, setting up your deliverables for post-production. All the minutiae people hate doing is actually what our company does. So we would come on in that case as a work for hire in association with co-production. We come on to the production, we go through that, we take care of the tax credits, we take care of all those things, we get them all the way through delivery to the distributor. And then we would get paid a line item fee out of the production budget, and we would get back in profit participation.
So I'm going to go ahead and take a look. We have a few questions that have come in at the Q&A
Sure.
panel, and I think there's been a few that have come in the chat window. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Q&A just to see what there is. Let's see. So is there a way for people to find out some of the projects that you've worked on and what the results do? You provide can you provide recommendations? Can you provide credits that prove that you've had success bringing films to market that have gone through this development process?
Sure. A lot of the films that we do, though, we just do development services, which is not a credit on IMDb. However, you can look up myself and any of our partners in MPMG and see what we have done as credits. Some of the films that we've done that have got, like most recently, Reagan, the film with Dennis Quaid, we did development services on that. We did not come on as production for that. They had it well in hand. We've done development services for a lot of films that are, out in the marketplace on Amazon. But those things are generally, again, we don't do a lot of co-productions with other clients. We will take those on some cases if it's really marketable. In those cases, usually Jeff goes, oh, this is really marketable, you should get involved. And so, that we're not stupid. In those cases, we generally would like to get involved with those clients. But yes, you can go on our website. We have testimonials from clients. We can I think we provided you with a list of some of the films that we've done recently. So it's pretty available. Some of the things that we've done that have, again, just development services to get them to financing, and then our job's over. Yeah, those are available.
Very cool. Let me go ahead and check again. We have more questions. Let's see.
May I address one real quick? It was, how does MPMG compare to companies like Buffalo 8?
Mm.
Okay. I actually know Luke and Matt and those guys over there, and they're great.
So do I, oddly.
What's that?
So do I, oddly. They get around.
Yeah, no, they're great. I've known them for years, and there's nothing wrong with them. There's Ingram Studios. There's a bunch of companies out there that do what we do. We're not the only game in town. But I think, how does it compare? I think when you contact these companies and, it's like a job interview, you're interviewing them for a job, us as well. And I think what it comes down to is a relationship basis. How comfortable are you working with? Like I know Patrick Ingram well. I've known him for years. We came up as line producers together. Some people love working with him. Some people don't get his vibe. Some people love Buffalo 8 and Bond It, which is basically the same company. Some people don't really like their business methodology. So I think it's going to be a relationship of you get in and you go, okay, this feels good. It feels right. I feel comfortable working with these people. So I can't tell you how do we compare to them? I don't know. You'd have to ask our clients.
It's very cool. So another question, and I think this is one that Jeffrey can address probably very well, which is, what's your take on issue-based films and profitability in the current market? Classically, people will drive you away from issues being stated, like abortion or gay or religious persecution, except in some cases where it seems to work market-wise. So what's your take on that right now? Is that something that when somebody brings you a project like that, does that factor into your analytics? Do you think it usually helps or hurts?
Well, there's multiple parts to that answer. Number one, we just saw in the last election that there's a lot of people that think a lot of different ways. And people who love one thing and don't love another. I think that there's a market size for almost everything. So we want the film to be properly sized for the potential market audience, really. We're calling it market, but it's audience. It's not a game, it's human beings and how they feel about things and how they react to things and what their aspirations are, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we can identify audience. I worked on a lot of faith-based films, like Ray was just talking about one we did together. Some of them are quite small, you know, uh, and I even have ideas about why. So why is a Jennifer Garner faith-based film go big, 60 million, 80 million or whatever in the marketplace? But a lot of the other ones are hovering down around 5, 10, 20. There are limits in every audience. And, only a few people have broken out of those limits and gone, quote unquote, four quadrant really deeply. So I think there's a market for almost everything. As long as, I don't want to work on something that really unsavory. You know what I'm saying? But other than that, there's an audience for almost any idea. Is it an issue? What's an issue for one person is not an issue for another person.
It's, I think one of the things that you can look at is if you're looking at something that's a polarizing subject, politics, right? You need to find your audience. It's just like a documentary. You need to, if you're going in to make it, and documentaries, by the way, are really hard to monetize. Jeff and I have had conversations about this for years. They're really hard to monetize. If you use them as a marketing tool, fantastic. If you use them to try to make profit in the marketplace, you're kind of screwed because, that again, like picking a polarizing subject like politics or something to make a film with, documentaries and those types of films have as Jeff said, a very narrow bandwidth audience that you've got to exploit first before you go in and try to make this film, because you've got to go, I'm making it for them. And if other people see it, great. But, and sometimes the controversy works in your favor and sometimes it works so against you. In your favor, things like Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson's film. Everybody, was up in arms about it, but it made hundreds of millions of dollars because everybody was going to go see it. Now, that's a polarizing subject that sometimes works in your favor. But I think if you were to make, the recent Trump film with Sebastian Stan, just tank. Why? Too polarizing. It's like you've got a subject matter that too many people feel too strongly about, and it's unfortunately creates a negative effect for trying to build an audience.
Cool. So when it comes to foreign markets, are the film analytics are significantly different. And I think part of your strategy, as is required for a project that's going to have multi-million-dollar budget, you have to have a foreign strategy. Um, can you talk a little bit how the film analytics work for foreign markets? Like, where do you get the data, Jeffrey, for those kinds of for that kind of analysis?
Yeah, well, I'm a battling whales for information. Okay. So I'm constantly sucking in water full of krill, but it is a big job. Okay. There are groups in the EU, in Asia, et cetera, where you can get data and you can break things down. I often look at foreign box office market by market to see where my hotspots, almost like a heat map, see where my hotspots are for a particular topic or a particular type of film. So there's a lot of ways of doing it. I worked on a picture called, and I've done this multiple times. I worked on a picture called The Meg. I actually had to model that 7 times before they funded it. And each time I had a different breakout of markets according to who was going to come in and finance components of it, including at one time, the China Railroad was going to put $25 million into this film. And, so it Bill was, it worked China a lot, but all over the world. So every time I do a film, it may need a completely different or a somewhat different kind of a model that I'm doing, where I'm breaking down different different market components, et cetera. I work on films that are offshore based. They may be UK based or other Iceland, other places I've worked on films. And so you kind of get into a sort of an upside down flow of what the markets are, who's the biggest, and how do they flow from there, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I don't, hopefully I'm answering the question. Each one has to be dealt with on a case by case basis. But I will say for many of the small films nowadays, we're defaulting because of certain complications in the market to digital exclusive model, which means run the board, one contract. Okay. And one of the things that Ray and I have been talking about is how I want the world to crack open more again, so we can go market by market and really maximize the value of a film. We're in a little bit of a trick bag right now.
Well,
And it's,
because the big streamers kind of dominated the market so much that they became, for lack of a better word, were worldwide theatrical release. It was like you, if they got it, that was that. Then it's just
well,
changed everything.
yeah, but they created a whole bunch of other things that they thought was to their business, to the best of their business, which resulted in all of the unions going ballistic
Yes.
last year. And that was directly related to things they were doing in their contracts that were basically screwing people out of the back end ownership of the project.
Hmm.
So there's many things that are going on.
It's
So
very.
I want the world to be cracked open again. That's my way of.
I think we all do. It's a little bit like living in Monopoly City, or it has been. But that's one of the reasons I'm so hopeful, because it seems like it's breaking. What I have a couple more questions. One is, somebody says they have film analytics for their first feature directorial debut and a killer pitch deck, and they'd like to talk to you about a work for hire and or a co-production opportunity. So how do people reach out to you Do they reach out to Motion Picture Media Group? Is there a way, an email address that they can reach out to you on to see how they can submit their script and other materials to you?
Grace, where I hit that.
Sure. All right. So we have a submission portal on our website. Wait, Nancy, if it's okay with you, I can put that in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead and put it in
All
the
right.
chat.
And there we have a questionnaire and a place that you can upload the elements that we need to look at just on the first pass. And so if you have I don't think there's a place for a pitch deck, but after we get the required materials that we need, we'll send you an email and ask you for any additional information, and then you can send it to us that way. But I am going to
Yeah. If your
go
pitch
get that link.
Yeah, if your pitch deck's PDF or something, you can upload it along with your script and other materials. We do require that you have copyright on the intellectual property just because we can't take unsolicited material. So I would, if you haven't copywritten it, it takes you 20 minutes and $60 or $65, whatever they charge nowadays. But I would
And
definitely,
that answers that NDA question that I've seen popping up a couple of times.
oh, and yeah, no, NDAs are, by the way, non-disclosure documents. There's one that's been enforced since 1952 in the state of California. They're useless. I asked an attorney friend of mine, I'm like, why are you still doing NDAs? He goes, billable hours.
Mhm.
You know, it's just something for lawyers to do to generate revenue. But registering with the WGA is useless. They're a guild. They're not a union. And they're not the Office of Copyright. Just go on the U.S. Office of Copyright. I think it's copyright.gov. There is a form that you can just go ahead. Oh, by the way, if you're going to register with the U.S. Office of Copyrights, I have 3 rules. Write them down. Rule 1 is make sure you turn off your pop-up blocker because it's a government site. So it's going to link you from site to site. If your pop-up blocker is on, it's going to kick you off each time. So temporarily turn off your pop-up blocker, go onto the site, register, just like everything else in the world. You'll get an account, you'll get a password, and then you'll start filling out. There are 7 steps to registration for copyright. The second rule I have is make sure you have a PDF ready to upload of your script and materials that you're copywriting, because they're on a 5-minute timer. And
Mhm.
if you go further than 5 minutes, you click off and you get to do it all over again. So have that. Second rule is have your PDF ready to upload right away. So you're not searching for it. The third rule is, as they say in the infomercials, have your credit card ready because they're on the same 5-minute window. So those are the 3 rules to getting your materials copyrighted. You go ahead and upload everything. They'll give you on your account a status, and it'll be your copyright status. And that number that they give you, your case number is what they call it. That is your copyright number. So instantly you've copywritten it. All you have to do is take a screenshot of that or get the copyright number to us so that we can verify and protect you and you can protect yourself with the US copyright.
We actually need the email. The Copyright Office will email you confirmation, and it'll have your email address, your name, and the confirmation number. Just print that to a PDF and upload that onto the submission portal, and that is perfect.
And if you don't understand copyright and you don't understand why that is the gold standard for protecting your work worldwide, take a moment and go watch the lawyer-led workshop by Paul Levine, who's a leading entertainment attorney. It's on. You can find it by going to nfm24.com, which is my quick link to my training site. But if you go there, watch Paul's introduction to copyright and why it's the strongest form of intellectual property protection in the
Excellent.
world.
Yeah.
You cannot do film. You cannot be an author and you cannot be a filmmaker without fully understanding copyright. Cannot be done because you will go broke. You have to understand copyright. And also you'll understand why there are reasons why studios make you sign something that says, hey, we may be working on something different. And Paul actually addresses that as well, which is because in the state of California, if you pitch something to a producer, then there's the understanding that if they decide to produce that even though you just pitched an idea, which is not generally protectable, because you pitched it, there's a presumption of a contract. So that's why they always have this thing that they want you to sign. Not that Moving Picture Media Group does, but my point is when you go to Warner Brothers and you send them their screenplay, they have forms that you have to submit that basically say, "Hey, I'm submitting you something that I protected by copyright or whatever." Da, da, da. But they're not going to sign an NDA for you either. Nobody's signing that thing because it's not necessary and because it indicates that you don't understand copyright and you don't understand the business of film and why it's not necessary. It just doesn't happen. So I just mention it because I remember back in the day, people kept saying, "Oh, make sure you get an NDA, make sure you get an NDA." And it was like, you might as well just stamp amateur on the top of your head, in my opinion. You should talk to a lawyer about these things. I am not a lawyer. However,
Yeah, no, NDAs are something that are sort of really 1990s. I think that if you protect yourself with copyright, and we don't, and by the way, if you're submitting to MVMG, we would be work for hire at all stages. We never have a lien against
right,
your intellectual property, no encumbrances. I would say, as a rule of thumb, do not give anybody, even if somebody comes on and says, "Hey, I'm going to produce your film for you,"
oh yeah,
not give them anything that lets them have a lien, and encumbrance, an attachment to your intellectual property, because that is the value. That IP, that story, that is the entire value of what you're creating.
right.
So
Paranormal
that's
activities was cost. How much did it cost to make like 10,000, 12,000, some ridiculous tiny amount of money? But how much is it made in revenue from every single film? So if the guy who was producing that had encumbered that project by saying to somebody that he worked with along the way, "Well, if you help me as an executive producer, I'll give you 50% of the revenue it generates." Like, he would have given away massive quantities of revenue and probably made any future development of that project impossible because there would be nothing else to give other people that work with you. So it's just important to pay attention to how you attach people to your projects. There's it's another reason you have to go through development. So you know what the rules are and you know who's worth attaching to your project and you have the structures in place. You have the company in place and you have the contracts and the lawyers in place in order to make sure the agreements you sign aren't going to mess you up. And that's something that new producers don't understand. They just have no concept. Even people who've worked for years for the studios don't understand the fundamentals of of protecting their work
Yep.
by
again,
having a company.
yeah, again, you need to treat it like a business. And one of the things we do in development is we help you with the legal formation, forming a limited liability company, which you then assign the rights of your intellectual property to that LLC or limited liability company of which you are the manager. So there's a lot of protections that you put in place to protect you, to protect, you know, your intellectual property and protect the process of making your film.
There's something I kind of want to say around this whole topic, but it's something that Ray and I talked about a lot, early on. And that is that every step that we take in the development process is imbuing more value into your project. And if it's not, what the heck are you doing it for? And why are you spending money on it? That's what's happening is you're imbuing, you are making it more, you are moving it toward completion, toward reality. And each step that you take, legal, et cetera, analysis, all the rest of that is toward that in. And I do turnaround studies for people and libraries and things of that nature. Turnaround being project that didn't get to funding and then is flipped over and someone else buys it. I do turnaround studies. And if a project's not there, there's less value in that turnaround activity. So you're literally imbuing value into the project, bringing it as close to a ready state as possible. Sorry, but I just wanted to say that.
No, I think it's exactly right. It's like, why are you spending money on this thing if it's not going to be, and if it's not going to be contributive? I guess the final question is, I think before we wind up tonight is, and is two things. One, to mention that we have another workshop coming up that's in the first part of 2025 that talks about why the lay of the land has changed so dramatically over the course of the last 6 months to a year, and why it's making things that were previously much more of a challenge finally starting to be much more like the market of the 80s and 90s than it it was like the market of the 2019, 2020, and 2021. What was that? That was crazy. So we'll talk about what the big changes are and what to look forward to and how it's going to impact your project. And the final question from Raman is, do you accept multi-series TV projects or TV projects as well as film projects?
Sure, absolutely. The format, is not necessarily I mean, we've done documentaries for clients as well. Television, it's pretty much the same process of development, whether it's film, television, documentaries, other format. The development process doesn't alter dramatically. There are certain things that you have to look at differently because it's a different market and you're approaching it differently. The methodology of deployment in the marketplace, as well as your finance model, are going to be somewhat different, but it's all pretty much the same process.
May I add a note to that?
Please.
My part of it is a lot harder depending on how we structure it. Strategy is always really crucial. If we're going to model an actual series where we're looking at how much we bring in from each episode, et cetera, whether it's 5 or 10 or 45, okay, my job becomes that much harder because I'm having to deal with so many more moving parts, a much more complex financial model. So, besides that, it costs more. And it's a bit harder. And we're in a different marketplace than we used to be. We definitely are. I see it sliding back to a large degree. In not just becoming, simple, but sliding back toward that, particularly as Ray mentioned, AVOD, along with some revitalization of television and bundling, a whole bunch of things like that. But that part is harder. We're working on one right now where we're structuring it as a feature film to be a backdoor pilot.
Mm.
And it's going to be sold that way. So that was much easier. You see what I'm saying?
You know,
That
you
makes
just
total
on,
sense. Go
you
ahead.
just hit on something which somebody I think asked earlier on, which is how do you know if you're going theatrical? How do you know if it's going streaming? That's a really interesting question. And so one of the things that happens in development is you start getting your data, you start getting your analytics, you start finding a methodology of deployment into the marketplace. And sometimes, you'll go, oh, it's going to be theatrical. And Jeff, he comes in and goes, no, it's streaming because that's where the market is. Or sometimes he'll go, oh, it's just start streaming. And he'll come, and he actually came back with something that was brilliant. I never thought of it. He's like, no, and we were talking we do a vendor meeting with all the vendors for our client, and we all get together and kind of weigh in on what's going on with the individual project. But one of the things that was really funny is he was like, well, no, this is going to be, you're going to go to the festival market. And I was like, wow, that's brilliant. I never thought of it because you're hitting the festival market. While there is a marketing budget, which is about 11 to 18 grand per market is your cost as a producer to hit those markets. But you're getting a different audience vector and you're getting a different methodology of deployment into the marketplace. And, you go, oh my God, I would have never thought of going to a festival circuit to take my film out that way. So when you're doing development, a lot of these people are getting together. You're getting, again, as I say, people smarter than me are all getting together and figuring out the best way to maximize the potential for revenue and exploitation of your project. So we don't determine, oh, it's going to go theatrical. A lot of data determines that for us.
Sure. All right. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time to hang out with us tonight. If you have any questions, you want to make sure that if you don't get the answers directly from Moving Pictures Media Group, you can also reach out to me at nancyfultonmeetups.com. I hope you will check out the site. You can go to nancyfultonmeetups.com and you'll find a link to the videos, and it covers stuff like legal fundamentals. It discusses things like copyright, what happens if you get divorced, what happens if you die, telling true stories, legal issues involved. So being informed is really important, and they also has a bunch of other topics you might find interesting. I focus on micro budget features for the most part because that's kind of what I find in the past, what I found interesting for the most part. But I think the market is changing radically, and the doors are finally starting to open, so it's possible to do the kind of projects most of us have hoped to do over the course of our lifetimes.
Thanks for listening to the Hollywood Insider Podcast. If you have questions you'd like answered, guests you would like to suggest, or topics you'd like us to cover, please email Nancy at nancyfultonmeetups.com. If you like what you hear, please click to follow the podcast and give us a kind word in the comments. If you find our thoughts and suggestions help you, please share our podcast with other creators who need help. We love being of service to creative minds. This podcast is produced by No Better Friend Entertainment, and this audio recording was copyrighted in 2024. All rights reserved. Music for this episode is licensed for commercial use from pond5.com.